squeals.
Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. Today's been kind of a crazy day. I just got back from Tenino. So thanks for letting me get settled in real quick. So we can go ahead and get started. Alrighty. So I'm Emily Klaus, Chair of the Regional Housing Council and Thurston County Commissioner, and I'm joined today by many of our wonderful county staff. Tom, Leah, Kaven, Elisa, looking around my screen, Alex, and I think that's it.
And Jackie, Jackie Velasco.
Oh, I see you, Jackie. There's always one. I'm trying so hard to get better at that. And I think that's all from the county, and I'll pass it over to Olympia.
Hi, all. Danny Midron with the Olympia City Council. We've got a crew here today too. I see Stacy Ray, Jacinda Stelgis, and Susan McLaughlin, who might be new to you all. She's our new Community Planning and Economic Development Director. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so.
Awesome. And then how about Tumwater?
Hi, thanks. Michael Altauser, Tumwater City Council, and I am joined by Brad Medrud from our Community Development Department.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And I see Carolyn from Lacey.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Cox, representing the City of Lacey, and I'm joined here today by Ryan Andrews, our Planning Manager, and our wonderful Housing Coordinator, Jennifer Adams.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn. And how about Tumwater? Wait, we already did Tumwater. We have
Are
also...
we that forgettable?
It's been a day. It's been a very, very long day. We've had a lot of long days lately with the weather getting nice. There's tons of events, so my brain's all over the county right now. Let's see.
We need Yelm.
Alrighty. We have Gary from Yelm.
Yeah, Gary Cooper, Planning and Building Manager for the City of Yelm. It looks like I'm a team of one today. So
awesome. Well, thanks for joining. And we also have some of our advisory board members. I see Charlia. Hey, Charlia. Alrighty. Is there anyone else I'm missing?
Casper is on the Homo Services Advisory Board.
Hi, Casper. Good to see you. All right. So, yeah, thank you for being here. All right. So moving on, we need to review the agenda and approve the April 9th meeting minutes. So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Non-debatable motion. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Perfect. Alrighty, moving on. Do we have anyone here for public comment?
We did have one person sign up for public comment. And Leah, are you seeing? I'm not seeing them in the attendees list.
I'm not. Their name is Kyle Lucas. If they are, they can raise their hand.
If anyone would like to make public comment, please do raise your hand, and we will elevate you to make public comment. I'm not seeing any raised hands. So it does not appear we have any public comment tonight.
Alrighty, no problem. Did we get any written comments that would be of interest to the full council?
There was an email that was sent out by Ty Gundel just maybe an hour or so ago. I have not had a chance to review those in full, but I believe our HC members did receive an email this afternoon from Ty Gundel of Olympia Mutual Aid Partners concerning right-of-way funding.
I did see that as well, right as I sat down and didn't have a chance to review that, but thank you for flagging it for those who want to review that when they have the time. So then if we don't have anyone here for public comment, we can move on to the next item. Thurston Affordable Housing Advisory Board, request for information, recommendations, and I will pass this over to Charlia.
Awesome. Yes, it's actually, is it request for information? Oh yeah, for the pipeline, yes. So request for information for the pipeline, mixing up RFP and RFI again as we do. I'm sure y'all understand. So we got our pipeline requests with the RFP. People submitted around the same time. We got to it a month afterwards because as y'all know, the RFP was a fun time. So you have it in the staff report, but essentially we chose to fund the majority of the projects at a total of 2,750,680, except for Reality Homes and Safe Place for Safe Place's request. This is the 2028 pipeline. So given the timeline of Reality Homes, we were excited about the project and more affordable housing in Yelm, and we know that they were working very closely with the city of Yelm. However, we think that they should probably apply for the 2026 request for proposals. Therefore, their application would have been us funding after they'd already spent the money, which is a tricky thing to do if sometimes impossible. And then the other one, we didn't fund Safe Place, largely because I think that they just need to come back and talk further with the county or with City of Olympia, anyone who is interested in talking to them about best practices and improving the application for the future. We funded Homes First's projects. Each one was around 100,000. And then we funded the Thurston Housing Land Trust, 236,000, and Habitat for Humanity, 2 million for their 3900 Boulevard project, exciting project. And I think really the only thing to say is, like any pipeline, they have to come back and reapply. And of course, I just want to say this always, we encourage folks to keep coming back and trying, especially with new and exciting projects. I don't think there's anything else to report on that, but I'm available for questions.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Charlia. Are there any questions? No questions? All right. Well, no problem. I appreciate that rundown, Charlia. And the action on our agenda is to approve the capital pipeline placement and funding recommendation. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
This is Michael. I'll second the motion.
Okay, perfect. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that motion?
I'd just like to thank Charlia and crew for another really good job on this. I know how hard it is.
Thanks, Carolyn. And I echo that gratitude. Yeah, I won't get on my soapbox because I did that last time, but like Carolyn said, we know this is difficult, so we really appreciate the work. So then we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, then I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Charlia. All right, so moving on to the next item. So we have the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee request for proposal, and I will pass this one over to Kaven.
Thank you very much, Emily. I'm going to let Casper, co-chair of the Homeless Services Advisory Board, present on this one. Casper, do you need me to screen share at all?
If you'd like to, yes.
All right. There we go.
So we
I'm just
had
gonna have that up for you to reference.
Thank you. Thank you. So the HASAB board is putting forth the recommendation for Confluence Northwest as the funding supporter for the Lived Experience Committee. After discussion, we unanimously voted for Confluence, although I believe there was one abstention, based on a recommendation from the Lived Experience Committee Board to go back to Confluence as they were their original funder. And Kaven, if you have any additional comments, please feel free to support.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. The organization, the group Confluence Consulting Northwest, they were the original body that helped build the current Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee. Just as a little background on its purpose, the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee exists to provide feedback and consultation around policies and procedures within our homeless response system. Currently, they're working to give direct input on our county's next 5-year homeless response plan. That's a big undertaking that they're working on. Part of that will culminate into a lived experience listening session that's happening at Sergio's tomorrow at 5:30. But back to this. Confluence was one of 3 agencies that applied for the facilitation of the LESC. This is a contract for a 1-year contract for $50,000. The LESC members met and reviewed all the applications. We felt at a county level, we felt this was important to give them agency in determining who would be their facilitator. They had the opportunity to review all 3 applicants. One of the applicants was previously denied by the Homeless Service Advisory Board, and they did resubmit an application, a new application, but at the end of the day, the LESC decided that they wanted to go with Confluence Northwest. They sent that recommendation to the Homeless Services Advisory Board. 2 of the LESC members do sit on the Homeless Services Advisory Board. There was deliberation and a short review of all applicants before continuing on with the LESC recommendation. So the HASAB is essentially bringing forth that recommendation, honoring the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee's request to go with Confluence Northwest.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Casper and Kaven, for that background. Are there any questions?
This is Carol, and I have one. Does anybody recall why Confluence did not continue on after the first year of the contract?
Tom was here at the time, so may have a clearer explanation.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I think it was at that point, Confluence as a consulting firm, we were looking to shift. They did a lot of the work bringing the LESC, doing the research, the foundational elements of establishing the LESC. At that point, there was interest in transitioning to a local nonprofit provider to take over. So Confluence, we submitted an RFP, and Confluence at that point was looking to transition. There was a funding reduction, and it was just felt that a nonprofit local provider would be best. And so I think that was at that point, there was that at that point, Pipe and Interfaith Works applied to be the provider, and so Pipe was selected.
Right. Okay. And then what's changed with Confluence to make them want to do this now?
I don't want to speak on behalf, but I think, I think they have a vested interest in wanting to make sure the LESC succeeds. And I think, to be honest, there were some struggles with the facilitation under Pipe. So I think they have a desire to ensure that it succeeds.
Okay.
And so when it became open, and after the first round of applications, when there was not a successful application through our RFP, they felt it was appropriate at that point to kind of throw their hat in the ring again, as there was no local provider who stepped up to take on the role.
Great. Thank you for shedding some light on that.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Carolyn, and thanks, Tom. Are there any other questions on this item? All right, no questions. All right, well then I think we're ready for a motion, and it looks like the requested action is to approve the HASAB recommendation to select Confluence Northwest as the awardee for the LESC facilitation RFP. Do we have a motion?
So moved. This is Carolyn.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Alrighty, then that motion also passes unanimously. Good job. That's exciting. Alrighty.
I just wanted to clarify one thing I said. I said that the Lived Experience Housing Steering Committee's input on the 5-year plan would culminate tomorrow at the listening session, but it's more of a milestone. They'll continue to have a voice in the process until we submit a draft of the 5-year plan.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Alrighty, so then next on our list is eviction prevention rent assistance with Catholic Community Services. And this I'm passing over to Jackie.
Thanks, Emily. I will actually also, like Kevin, defer to Casper to speak on behalf of the HASAB. And Casper, if you need me, I'm here to back you up with any extra info that I can add.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to kind of jump in and Emily, Commissioner Klaus, if we could have you, because this was presented to the Board of County Commissioners, if you could provide a little context of why this came back to the HASAB for consideration from the Board of County Commissioners, I think that would be helpful context.
Absolutely.
Casper presents the recommendation.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks, Tom. So yeah, just a little bit of background on this item for those who haven't heard. The Board of County Commissioners did not feel comfortable moving forward with the original recommendations to award these funds to Community Action Council because we're still resolving our previous relationship through our former contract with CAC. And while that's still getting worked out, the Board of County Commissioners felt that needs to be completely resolved before they feel comfortable moving forward with an additional contract with the agency. So I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the emergency HASAB meeting to explain the perspective of the Board of County Commissioners, just to ensure that the HASAB understands that we really appreciate their work. We know, at our last RHC meeting, we kind of talked through how difficult these decisions are when you're talking about funding life or death services. And so we really wanted to make sure that the HASAB knew we value their perspective and we understand that they have lived experience, which makes them subject matter experts when it comes to analyzing these types of programs for funding and prioritizing these applications. So I went ahead and attended the emergency HASAB meeting and was able to answer some questions for folks. And I always want to make myself available anytime I can act as like a liaison between the Board of County Commissioners and our partners, because we really value our partners in the community, and housing is it's a top priority for, I think, all of our jurisdictions. Everyone who's here probably understands how important that is. So I just wanted to make sure that the HASAB knew that I was available and accessible to them if they had any questions. And from that meeting, the HASAB went ahead and discussed the item further after I had the chance to step out of the meeting. And this is the conclusion that they came to. So now this is coming back before the RHC for the discussion now. And I can answer any questions about that, or I can turn it over to Casper to present the item. Are there any questions? All right, perfect. Thanks, Tom, for the segue. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Casper.
Thank you, Emily. So we had 2 meetings to take the time to really discuss the HASAB's recommendation for approving Catholic Community Services to handle the EPRA funds. We reviewed their application and felt that based on their responses, that we felt they would be capable of holding the EPRA funds. And I believe there was 1 abstention and otherwise a unanimous vote for approval of these recommendations. Also, Catholic Community Services wanted to hire people who have already had experience with EPRA to be able to better support the people in the community with these funds. So all of those things in consideration, we feel that Catholic Community Services is the best option and why we recommended them.
Perfect. Thank you, Casper. Is there anything you'd like to add, Jackie?
Yeah, I can just add a little bit more context. Thanks, Casper. I think, so the original amount sort of considered, we had some conservative estimates based on the original state budget projection, sort of running alongside the same process as we were sort of determining who might be a good fit for the for single adults specifically for EPRA funding. We got our finalized state budget in with a significant increase, unexpected increase in EPRA funds. And so the award for a provider for single adults specifically is hovering just under $800,000. And so a big thing to consider is that these contracts are on a reimbursement basis and cut rent checks and rental arrears, so kind of high volume amounts of money passing through. So the number of providers who are sort of have the infrastructure and available funding to kind of front those costs and then bill for that or invoice for that on a reimbursement basis is a pretty small pool. And so the reason that the HASAB initially convened was to determine if there was a provider to who may perhaps didn't apply under the original RFP, who might have the capacity to take on a project of that size, which is why Catholic Community Services came to mind. They're a local provider. They are not historically an EPRA provider, but they do have a long-standing successful history as a rental assistance provider for HEN and HENbridge, and organizationally have the capacity on a reimbursement basis to handle a contract of this size. So that was some of the HASAB discussion around first approaching them for a proposal to see how they would build out the program and direct those funds. And the second meeting was to review that proposal and see if it met expectations of the group, which, as Casper shared, the group agreed that it seemed as a reasonable proposal. Catholic Community Services didn't apply under the original RFP. The way that those applications kind of came in, you might recall from the last meeting, is that a lot of our local organizations prefer to stay within the demographics they primarily serve. And so a lot of folks were happy to do EPRA, but they wanted to work specifically with families because that's their organizational focus, or specifically with youth. And so in this case, we were just looking for a provider who could prioritize and serve single adults with priority for seniors and veterans, sort of with cultural competency with those particular groups. And Kevin and Tom, if I missed anything critical, or Casper, if anything else came to your mind too, you can fill in any more blanks.
Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate that context. Is there anything anyone else would like to add? I'll just say I really appreciate the work on this item and the flexibility of the HASAB and the Regional Housing Council just to kind of come back and revisit this item after the outcome at the Board of County Commissioners meeting. And thank you to staff who have put in, the time and effort needed to ensure that we could see this through and get it across the finish line. I'm really pleased at the outcome. I was a bit concerned when the Board of County Commissioners discussion was going on, just because I was like, okay, what is our ultimate goal here if we're going to send this back for reconsideration? Are we looking to fund a different kind of program, or are we looking to fund the same kind of program for the same population? Because there aren't many programs in our community that actually serve this specific population. So I'm happy to see that we were able to find an avenue to award the funds to a similar program. Michael, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks. I want to make just sort of a similar comment. I think this might be the first time where something has been sent up to the county commission and there was an alternative result. I mean, the first time, certainly in recent memory, maybe it's happened in the past or something that I'm not recalling at this moment. But this sort of seems to be kind of like a functional sort of test of that system. And when we were sort of creating these advisory board groups, we were trying to come up with this way to where things can be meaningful in terms of working with them to where there are differences of outcomes that are desired, to where instead of just choosing a different outcome, it then goes back to the committee so that we can still sort of lead with folks who have subject matter expertise and experience. So I guess I just want to say that I'm sort of pleased that, while this isn't the outcome that was originally sent forward, that it seems like the system is working from the perspective of making sure that when the commission has concerns about these things, that it goes back to the folks who are doing a lot of this work, who have the subject matter expertise, and that are lending their time and their intelligence and their passion for trying to get these things done. So I guess I just want to say that I'm happy with this result because I think it really honors the process we were trying to establish.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure our staff and HASAB representatives do as well. And that was definitely one of the priorities for the Board of County Commissioners when we discussed this, was to allow the HASAB, empower the HASAB to still make the decision and just hopefully communicate that we're not quite ready to partner with CIC again, but that we do want to support this work and we do want to support the HASAB and all of the work they do to bring these recommendations forward. So I just echo everything that you said. Are there any other comments or questions on this item before we move forward to the vote? Alrighty, not hearing any. So we have our request here on the screen to approve the HASAB's recommendations to sole source CCS as the EPRA provider. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? We just had some, so if there's any last minute thoughts, now's the time. Alrighty, not hearing anything, so we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, another unanimous motion is passed. Thank you. So next item, we're ahead of time, so that's great. We're moving right on through. So we have a funding update, and this is going to be led by Tom.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. And Kevin, you can stop sharing your screen for this if you'd like. So just an update. Jackie alluded to it a little bit. So you'll recall at the April meeting, you made funding recommendations based on what we projected our state funding would be, as well as our local funding. At that time, we were informed by the state to anticipate a 20% reduction in funding from the state. And so that was kind of the assumptions we were working under. Last week, we received a budget from the State Department of Commerce that was better than we expected. So that was good news. And so we have been working to make adjustments to awards proportionally based on how those funds can be allocated. And that was based on the motion that was approved by the RHC, the recommendation from the HASAB to award any variation in funds proportionally for those projects that are eligible for those fund sources. And then, so we've been working on making those adjustments. And then a little bit of bad news is we just heard yesterday, and actually just got the email today, that Commerce said, oops, we had a little bit of an error in our formula. We have to adjust your award down a little bit. So we still had more than we originally projected we were going to get. But it is we did receive a little bit less $500,000 less than what we thought a week ago we were going to get, which is unfortunate. So we are working with agencies to inform them of to kind of adjust those budgets and finalize contracts. So one area where we did see a substantial increase was in the rent assistance, the EPRA, which is now called eviction prevention funding. Homeless prevention funding. We were projecting only to receive about $1 million a year, and we're going to end up receiving about $2.3 million a year. So we received a substantial increase in our rental assistance funding, so that was positive. Overall, roughly, even with the reduction of that we just learned about, our funding is just about maybe just a tick below what we'd received previously. So certainly better than the 20% reduction we were anticipating, but so we ended up basically flat from previous year's funding. So that's, all things considered, is a positive. So we are working to make those final adjustments to agencies' award amounts. We'll be bringing those recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners in June. We're working on those contracts. We will send out, once we have the final award numbers, we will make that information public. But as I said, we just got the latest number from Commerce this afternoon. So I'm still working on those final adjustments, but wanted to provide that information to this board. But happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And Danny, I see your hand.
Yeah, so Tom, I just want to make sure I was tracking. The award amount is higher than we originally thought, just not as high as we were originally told it was going to be.
Correct.
Okay. And can you say those numbers again for the Homeless Prevention Fund?
So we were projecting to receive $1 million a year, and we received $2.3 million per year.
Excellent. That's great news. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. Carolyn.
Yeah, just an observation. Even though it sounds like it's better news than we thought, obviously there's still not enough money to go around to do all the work that we need to do, which is always a challenge. I think I'm troubled with what I'm seeing at Maple Court. It is deteriorating. We currently have, well, as of last Thursday, had 79 people in there. It is still continuing to serve as an enhanced shelter, but it is not getting the supervision that we think it ought to have from Lehigh. It's not, and there's not really good oversight of that supervision. And so I'm not totally quibbling with the funding distribution that's there. I think what I'm trying to say is that if this keeps on, it's going to be broken. I mean, we're not going to be able to ensure a safe, clean space for people to live in if we can't improve the supervision and operation of the Maple Court. So I guess what I'm doing is kind of waving a red flag and asking the group to kind of group think about how this might be improved upon. We did a little bit of math. Can't swear by the accuracy of it because I'm not a mathematician, but trying to figure out costs. What is a reasonable cost per bed in order to assure a safe and clean environment? And looking at the Unity Commons number, it looked like about $38,000 per bed. At Maple Court, I believe it's $26,000 per bed. So where is the sweet spot in there to have enough funding to assure a quality operation where people are safe and cared for in there? One thing that could possibly happen is we reduce the number of shelter beds at Maple Court in order to get to that, to use the funding that's been allocated and get to that spot. That's not something anybody wants to do. Another possible solution might be, we were awarded last year pretty fair amount. I think it was 4.25 million for converting this facility into permanent supportive housing, which was the intention for that space after, I think, the third year to move toward that. And I think there's still $1 million left that was intended to go for design for that conversion. So I just want to put this out there because everybody worked so hard to get this space, to buy the space, to get it open, to help accommodate the campers who have been living along the freeway, and it's just not working as well as it should be. Olympia has done a wonderful job with campus they supervise. They will, they'll tell them, if you don't comply with the rules here, we're withholding your funding until you do. And having that stick seems to be getting the job done. We don't seem to have a stick for Maple Court. So what do you all think?
I see Michael's hand.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for raising this issue, Carolyn. I guess I have a preliminary sort of question for staff. Is this, Tom, you mentioned sort of these funding levels, these are for operating dollars, is that right? Did Maple Court, I believe also, and Carolyn, you mentioned 4.25, and I think is there a new appropriation in the incoming capital budget for a similar amount? I think that there is, but I wanted to confirm.
I think that is the amount that just got passed. And then there was 1 million last year for design. Do
we know what the intent for the new 4.25 is? Is that to continue the conversion, or is that to address some of the, I know there's siding issues. You drive by, there's scaffolding up. They're working on the siding.
Right. Yeah. It is for, converting the motel into permanent supportive housing that is, kind of like Sandy's Flats, I guess, in terms of having a little bit more than just a hotel room kind of setting.
So, sorry, I don't mean, can I jump in and answer that question?
Yes, please.
I know Casper's got in. So the funding I was just talking about was our broad homeless services funding, and that did not incorporate right-of-way funding. So, happy to move on. Kind of the next item on the agenda was specific to the right-of-way funding. So the funding I was talking about was not specific to right-of-way funding. So I can provide some more context on the right-of-way funding.
I'm sorry.
Nope, that's okay. But
looks like I jumped the shark.
the discussion of what I was presenting on funding was our consolidated homeless grant, housing and essential needs, eviction prevention, rent assistance, those other funding sources separate from the right-of-way funding that we can talk about. And yes, that 4.25 is for the my understanding is it's for the conversion to permanent supportive housing. They currently have funding to deal with the structural issues of the building, and that is funding that the state provided directly to Lehigh to deal with the structural issues. So that's the construction you see going on currently. The 4.25 would be to convert it so it can be used as permanent supportive housing.
Thank you, Tom. Casper, I want to get to you, and we might be continuing the conversation on the next item, but I want to give you a chance to say something since your hand is up.
Thank you. I used to work at Maple Court from the initial acquisition of the building to about a year after um, it really opened and started accepting people. And I hear those concerns. I lived through those concerns and many more. And I I would really personally heavily recommend that maybe we just reset the calendar and keep it an emergency shelter. We just had 2 shelters shut down in Mason and another county, and our need for open shelters rather than people paying 30% of their income to live somewhere, I think is really essential at this point in time because we only have UGM in how many miles of radius? Thank you.
Thank you, Casper.
Thanks, Casper. I appreciate that input. So if there are more comments about this, I would request that we hold them for the update that Tom will provide on the row funding. And then if there are more questions, we can talk about this a little bit more. So Tom, I'll pass it back to you.
All right, so to go on to the row funding.
Let's see, that's next, right? Yep.
Yep. All right, and so this actually on your agenda is just kind of listed as information, but we are going to ask you to take action on this item. And so row funding in the past year between projects funding that the Thurston County receives for row projects as well as the city of Olympia receives for right-of-way projects. And I know we switched. Right-of-way was the old name. We like to call them rural projects. The new official name is the ERP program, Encampment Resolution Program. So if you hear, we're trying to transition to ERP, but row is a little easier to say. So we're still stuck in that past a little bit as a part of the transition. But all told, we'd received about $9.5 million between the Thurston County and City of Olympia. You can see the projects that have been currently funded under the ERP program. The current funding we're receiving beginning July 1st is about just over half of that. So just about $5.5 million of funding that we have to allocate for ERP programs. So, and this is what we were told to expect from the state, even though we advocated and tried to push for more funding. So there have been conversations. I've been part of conversations with City of Lacey and City of Olympia, particularly to look at allocating these funds. And so what we're bringing forth is a recommendation on how to allocate the $5.5 million of funds. In doing so, I would say a couple of things. We've heard from the Department of Commerce that their priorities for funding is that we fund and maintain operations for the 3 projects that they invested capital dollars into. And those 3 projects are Sandy's Flats, the old Olympia Inn that Interfaith Works acquired, Maple Court, which we've talked about, as well as the Franz Anderson Tiny Home Village. Those are the 3 where the state put capital dollars in, so they have expressed interest in ensuring that those continue operating. We also heard, and I don't want to speak for the City of Olympia, but City of Olympia indicated that a priority for them was funding for Quint Street Village. That $500,000 is essential to ensure operations for that 100-unit tiny home village, 30 which are set aside for row beds. That $500,000 of funding is critical to ensure that Quint Street Village can continue to operate. So those were the projects that were prioritized for funding. They also are the projects that help preserve the highest number of beds in the system. Additionally, with the Unity Commons was getting kind of over $1 million in operating funding. We continue to fund them under our regular homeless services dollars, but it left, with the amount of funding we have through that bucket, it left a substantial gap in funding for Unity Commons. So there was interest in providing some funding for the Unity Commons to help close that gap. And then we believe going forward, after the Percival Creek encampment is closed, that there will be not any new right-of-way encampments or no active right-of-way encampments. And that reduced the need for outreach. And so we are recommending some outreach for City of Olympia staff to monitor existing sites to ensure folks that they're not reoccupied, and to do some limited outreach to new to folks who are around the right-of-way encampments. And so that quickly spent our $5.5 million. You will see that we essentially provided modest inflationary increases to Sandy's Flats, Maple Court, and I'm missing the other one, Franz Anderson Village, which my understanding is going to be transitioning, and Vallejo is going to be assuming operations at the Franz Anderson Village project. So the Plum Street Village, again, don't want to speak for Olympia. Someone from Olympia can weigh in with more details. The Plum Street Village site will be closing at the end of at some point, and then Vallejo will transition to Franz Anderson property. So obviously, a reduction in funding means that we cannot fund every program. It means that there is a loss of beds, and there are certainly things that we would like to fund that we're unable to fund. But this is the recommendation we're bringing forward to maintain the highest priority projects at a funding level we think allows them to continue to operate. With that, happy to open it up for questions. Anyone? Yeah, happy to open it up.
All right, thanks, Tom. Charlia.
Not speaking on behalf of the TAHAB, speaking from my own perspective, as an former outreach worker, I do think it's a mistake to not fund outreach that isn't associated with the city. I understand the hope is that we won't have more row encampments. I think that is a hope. That we will have encampments one way or another. And I do think it seems like they're going to continue to be pushed out of metropolitan areas, which means they'll likely be closer to roads, highways, etc. I think we'll see an increase, and we always do, of unhoused people. And I do personally, once again, think this, sorry, dogs. I think we're kind of throwing the same tactic over and over again at the wall with how we're doing the sheltering of people, especially as it became more regressive and less person first, less harm reductive, lower barrier. I understand why city people in bureaucracy who work in the government and who represent the government and the people are worried about optics and image because you have to represent everyone. But I do think I personally see our combined forces pulling back from the steps that we've made over the last few years to be progressive and supportive of people. And to just respond to an issue as with a little Band-Aid. And so I absolutely so much love to the staff for figuring out how to disperse funding. That's super hard. I do think in the long run, it is regressive. Sorry.
Yeah, no need to apologize, Charlie. I totally hear you. And, we've worked together in spaces outside of government prior to me being in this role. And so I totally know, we've shared some conversations before, and I just appreciate your perspective. And yeah, and I do share some of those concerns as we move into this uncertain funding environment. Moving forward, it's probably not likely to get any easier. So sharing those honest thoughts, even though it can be kind of difficult to do that, is much appreciated. Tom or anyone, did you want to speak to those comments?
I guess I'll just say I don't disagree with Charlia. Certainly outreach is something that we do need to fund. And I will say we have funded OLIMAP for broad outreach activities under Hassab's recommendation. So there is funding to OLIMAP for other outreach activities, just not specific under the right-of-way program. So is it enough? Certainly not. But I would just kind of point out that there is funding for outreach kind of across the system more broadly, just not focused specifically on right-of-way sites.
And oh, go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, well, I guess ditto my earlier comments, and I appreciate that there was a slight addition for inflation for the funding for Maple Court. However, that funding, we're seeing things not working, deteriorating with the funding that exists right now. So it clearly is a problem. And so I'm asking that the county and Lacey get together and take a look at this and see what other funding there might be to bring this into a safer space. I'm really not so much worried about image as I am safety, and wanting people to have a place where they aren't going to be harmed further and they can get well. So I think maybe we let this go with the staff's conversation on this, but I just really wanted to underscore how serious the situation is, and that this could be a model for future programs, but if we allow it to fall into a really bad situation, then it's just, yeah, it can affect the future of our shelter operations in the county. So thanks for letting me do my little rant. But I say that in a cute way, but it is very deadly serious. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. Tom?
Yeah, just to respond that a little bit, Carolyn. So I will say that I have had conversations with Vanessa Dolby and Lacey staff, and our office, Jackie from our team, Caven, are increasing. Went out to Maple Court a month or two ago, talked to their case managers. We are increasing, committed to increasing our oversight of Lehigh and our monitoring of that. We also have some concerns where, as we look at revising their scope of work, we'll be looking at that. We do have concerns that Maple Court tends to exit people too quickly without really providing substantial case management. While certainly more money would be helpful, I think it's also I don't think necessarily more money is necessarily going to solve this issue. I think it's really our team working more closely with Lehigh and getting their best practices in place and how they operate more effectively, and that they have not spent I haven't checked most recently, but I don't believe they're going to spend the full 2.7 million that they're currently contracted to receive. So I think it's about more effective operations, and money isn't necessarily going to solve the issue.
Okay. And are we tracking how they spend it?
Yes, we receive all their invoices, and
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, help.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, let's just keep the meeting going, but I'm hoping that there can be further conversation about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I'll just say I'm more than happy to support putting this on a future agenda to have a more thorough discussion if that's what we would like to do. I definitely think it's worthy of, discussing until there's a solution or a path forward, because there are a lot of interests to balance, and of utmost importance is the safety and dignity of the people who live there, and ensuring that they don't end up back on the streets. And I think probably a lot of us can agree that we don't want to be displacing people back to the streets. And so that's what this conversation is really about. And
yeah,
and I know, like, you're speaking for Lacey, and Lacey is extremely proud of, being able to support this project. And I know that you all don't want to see it be unsuccessful. So I definitely think this is worthy of a robust discussion, and kind of like picking through what the county can do to help with ensuring that Lehigh is implementing best practices, because I've also heard some things that kind of raise red flags for me about how things are being operated, and which is common in this environment. There are unfortunately a lot of providers and contracted agencies that don't quite know how to deal with vulnerable populations. And so any guidance that we can provide, I'm happy to work with staff or the Regional Housing Council, or wherever I can put my efforts to ensure that we're not causing harm to the people who live there. That's something I will prioritize. So let me know if you'd like to add that to the agenda in the future, and I'd be happy to do that, or set up one-on-one meetings with anybody who wants to talk further. But Charlotte, I see your hand.
I think Tom actually answered my question, but or maybe more, I guess I was going to directly ask, is funding the issue here for Maple Court? And especially because I knew that not all of it was spent down. But I think y'all are always put in a difficult position. We are too, as at the TAHAB, between funding those who are the largest agencies who can put services forward and be reimbursed, and also sometimes you get stuck between a rock and a hard place with that. So I say that gently, of course. And I didn't mean to say that Maple Court was about optics. I think that I personally believe the whole right-of-way program was more about optics than helping people. And I think we all had to do our part no matter what, because you were directed to. We were directed to. So that is said with a lot of understanding and grace for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Danny. Well, Carolyn, do you want to respond to any of that?
I was just going to make one more reflection about the lack of the pool of providers. Lehigh model is low income housing. It's not special populations like this, and so it has its built-in inherent flaws to begin with. Unfortunately, the situation is, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that when we purchased the hotel, we gave it to Lehigh to operate. And so it's going to be, if we ever decide we want to part company with Lehigh, it's going to be tough to do. Am I wrong?
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt Danny. Yes, so the state provided funding directly to Lehigh to acquire it. So Lehigh owns the building. And that certainly is one of the differences from Olympia, where Olympia owns the property at Franz Anderson and Quincy. So that ownership does make the sticks a little more difficult, because you're correct. Lehigh owns the building.
Yeah.
And they were provided that funding directly from the state.
So then you get into the ego thing with one entity trying to tell the other entity it's business and how they need to operate. And so it's just going to take work. But I appreciate, Kevin, your efforts over there. And Jackie, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny?
Tom, I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more in the gap in funding for Unity Commons. So trying to remember if that gap is filled through other funding sources, or if there is like a big gaping hole in funding for the operations there.
Yes, so there is I would call it a substantial hole. So there, and my numbers may be off slightly, I'm doing this a little bit from memory. They put in a request to our RFP for $2.7 million. We are going to be able to fund them out of our kind of regular pot of homeless services in the vicinity of $1.9 million. And so this $2 million gets them up to a little over $2 million, but there would still be a $500,000 or so funding gap. We've had some very high level conversations with Interfaith in terms of whether they're going to be able to kind of fill that gap or what that impact is on those services. And I don't know exactly what that will be.
Okay, and so that's the gap for the next year is 500,000?
Yeah, that's a 1 year funding gap, yeah, for Unity Commons and the associated services.
Okay, yeah, that feels pretty substantial. So, you know, in terms of problem solving and things to bring back to the RHC for future consideration, you know, I feel like that's gonna be a problem. So just flagging that for all of us. It just makes me feel a little uneasy.
Yeah, me too. I'm actually beaming in from Interface Works offices here, and we'll have a board meeting right after this one is done.
Thank you, Danny.
Sorry, I'll just want to jump in. Sorry, not to raise my hand. Respond a little bit to one of Casper's comments about keeping this as a shelter. I will say that the plan all along was to convert this Maple Court to permanent supportive housing after 3 years, because one of the concerns was maintaining a $2.5 to $3 million operating budget is really challenging. So there was a concern that there wouldn't be the operating budget long term to maintain Maple Court, because we're not sure, you know, we'll have this right away money for this biennium, but there's some uncertainty along long-term funding. So certainly we need more shelter space in this community. And so one of the reasons we were looking to convert its Maple Court to permanent supportive housing was concerns about whether there would be the ongoing operating dollars at a $2.5 to $3 million level if the right-of-way money went away. So doesn't make it the right decision, but that was the concern and the thinking when we talked about converting it to permanent supportive housing.
Thank you, Tom. Casper?
Yeah, thank you. I believe I did say that I was aware of that process. I was there when they first purchased the building. My recommendation was, instead of immediately converting it to permanent supportive housing, I believe I did say resetting the clock so that it begins again as an emergency shelter, and then eventually starts that 3-year process to become permanent supportive housing. I know that they were already implementing case management as a recommendation before exit when I was leaving. So again, not saying we can't have it eventually become permanent supportive housing, but going back to that original plan and giving at least 112 people that chance, I think is worthwhile.
Thank you, Casper. Yeah, and I do appreciate, you know, the acknowledgement that we have to, I mean, consider how the landscape is changing around us as well, as far as like services that exist and then gaps that exist, and, you know, funding streams changing, especially coming down from the federal level, and reevaluating and assessing what the needs are here on the ground is extremely important. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and I do welcome continued conversations on how we can best support the people here in the community, and especially our most vulnerable neighbors, who are the ones that, you know, the burden really falls on the most as we're here having these conversations. So I do appreciate all of the input. So let's see, where does that leave us on our agenda? So the encampment resolution program is just informational, so there's no action.
Actually, sorry to interrupt. I would like action on that recommendation, because our next step is we need to go to the state to get a contract for these dollars. They've asked for our proposal. So I would, you know, the Regional Housing Council has been overseeing the right-of-way policy. So I would like, either if you want to adjust this funding proposal or a recommendation to approve kind of funding allocation, so we can then go back to the state to get those contracts, so we can have those contracts in place by July 1st, if possible.
Okay.
So we are looking, those will then go to the Olympia City Council and Board of County Commissioners for final approval, but we're looking for the RHC's approval of a funding allocation. And if you want to do something different than that's proposed, I'm happy to, you know, whatever the RHC's wants to do in terms of how to allocate these funds.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I was just looking at the agenda and it didn't say action. So
Yeah, we
I
missed that
appreciate
action.
that. Yeah, sorry about that. So does anyone need, I think I would benefit from having the screen shared again with the numbers back up on it while we talk about this, in case anyone wants to make suggestions, or make a motion to approve the recommendations. But based on the discussion, it might be good to have the numbers up on the screen in case that's helpful for anybody as we make this decision. So I see that's popping up now. So I guess I'll just start by asking if there's a motion. We could move to approve the recommendations and then, have a discussion if anyone wants to go another route. But Charlotte, I see your hand.
I just remember at the beginning of the meeting, Olymap had sent, or Ty Gundel on behalf of Olymap had sent an email, I assume about right of way. And so since they're I'm just reminding y'all if that's something that y'all need to reference while making decisions, since we've already had a big conversation.
Thank you. I actually I have that up on my screen now because it is relevant to this conversation. Because it was received just shortly before the meeting. I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, but I've skimmed through it throughout this conversation. And yeah, I appreciate Ty's comments a lot. For those who haven't had a chance to see that email, it's a very thoughtfully worded email about concerns with cutting funding for Olymap, for the ROW and ERP outreach services. So I know probably most of us haven't had a chance to review that email yet, but it is there if anyone wants to review that as we're talking. And that's partly why I wanted to bring the numbers back up too, so that we could kind of look and see what's happening as we hear these concerns. Are there any suggestions on a different route to go that is not in alignment with these recommendations up on the screen?
Boy, I feel like the nag today. Sorry, guys. I just have one thing, and this is no shade on Olympia at all, because I think you're doing wonderful work, but I do question the concept of using some of this funding to pay outreach staff. Having sat on the HHSC and then doing funding rounds and in the early days of this body, it was always questioned, if one of the service agencies wanted to use their funding to bolster their payroll. And I realize that this is specific work and all, but I think that sets kind of a bad precedent on funding. I mean, the city already retains administration fees, as does the county. So just thoughts on that. 150 is not going to make or break, well, 126 is not going to make or break things at all. But I just wanted to raise the question about, is that a use that we want to put these funds to? And again, no shade on Olympia. We love you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Well, luckily Kim is here and she's got her hand up. So Kim, would you like to speak to that? Oh, you're on mute, Kim.
Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate this whole conversation. I know that all of us have our unhoused folks first and foremost and really trying to find the best solution for them. I just, on my team, so I'm the homeless response coordinator, and I have 2 outreach people. We have spent a significant amount of time in the encampments. Like every day we're either at Percival, at the jungle, and really supporting folks there. And some of you know or don't know, like I come from the provider world. I used to run a shelter. So very trauma informed, and of course now representing the city, we've tried to bring some of that human-centeredness into the way we operate. And so we just really, you know, are very mindful and conscientious in how we manage that, and then also having to meet the needs with the city. And as you know, there are budget cuts, but probably for my outreach people, we spend a significant amount of time there in the encampments working on row people. And because we have the largest amount of contacts, I would say, of any outreach group in the entire county, because we get like anyone who notices an encampment notifies us, and then our team is out there. So it's not even just an encampments, and we find people who have been in, you know, who were previously enrolled, many people who've been exited from Maple Court, who are in different states of crisis. We've tried to re-get them back into housing when they didn't have that bridge. So I would just tell you, you know, like those funds are very well put to use. And so I know it's just a tough landscape right now with the budget cuts. So I just want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Did you have any more thoughts, Carolyn?
No, that's an old hand there.
Okay.
Thank you,
No
though.
problem. Yeah, no problem. Is there any further discussion on these items before we get to the motion? Okay. I'm just thinking as I'm reading. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just sort of state the obvious in terms of the gravity of the challenge we have here, with the amount of funding that's been allocated to us. You know, we're trying to do what we can with what we have, and that means some incredibly difficult, challenging choices that we have to make. And if we had the same amount of funding as last year, we would be in an entirely different space with a lot of these things. But I think that given the parameters that we have from the state to focus some of the funds on the projects where the state has invested money in the past, and then also doing sort of I guess you could look at it as like a CPI or an inflation bump for Maple Court, but it's not a sizable increase. It's $160,000 ish. That, you know, I think this is a balanced approach, and I think the best we can do with limited resources. So I think at this point in time, I would support moving forward the slate as it was presented, with this discussion in mind. And I'd be willing to make the motion if no one else has any other comments.
That sounded like a motion, so I'm gonna second it.
Okay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. So we're still in the discussion phase, but now we do have a motion on the table that will require some action. So I'll give a little bit more space for discussion if anyone has questions or comments. I will say, it's important to me, as you know, somebody who comes from a background of working with our local service providers. It's really important to me to not only find balance, but also really uplift those who have existing relationships with the folks that we're serving and that we're aiming to serve with these funds. And I'm just, maybe I should minimize the email I have, but I'm really trying to like process this email that we received about Olympia. But I'm thinking maybe that's something, you know, for down the road. I just want to say that I'm really interested in having discussions with our service providers like Olympia, who I know have established very strong relationships with this population, because it is really important to have outreach services that are ongoing. I remember this was a discussion back during COVID that I was having with staff at Olympia, actually, about the need to continue funding for outreach even after the COVID money is gone. And so I'm just kind of like thinking through those conversations I had years ago now at this point, and just want to say that I think it's really important for us to continue trying to find ways that we can consider supporting outreach at every level. And, you know, the city of Olympia is on this list of recommendations to provide outreach. And I think outreach from jurisdictions is important as well. But just want to say, you know, I really do empathize with service providers and people, you know, who are served by groups like OLYMAP, because that kind of outreach is also extremely important. And the emphasis on harm reduction from people who are really like subject matter experts is so important. So yeah, I'm just thinking ahead, I guess, at future conversations, because I would really like to advocate for those kinds of outreach services as well. And I guess, let's see. I don't want to take too much time, so let me check the clock real quick. I don't know. I guess that's a conversation I could have offline, maybe like with Kim. I could reach out to you or Danny. I see your hand.
I'm sorry, my cat did that.
No, no worries. Your cat has the floor too if they want to say anything. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I'll just kind of keep that in mind and maybe bring it up a little bit later. Because yeah, I wish I would have seen this email before the meeting because it's really on my mind. But as of this point, I guess, you know, I'm ready to move forward with this motion to approve the staff recommendations and just kind of putting a pin in my head about reaching out to Kim later to discuss like how the city of Olympia's outreach services compare to the outreach services that are provided by our trusted service providers like OLYMAP and other groups. But for now, we have a motion and a second. And is there any further discussion on this item? So the motion on the floor, just as a reminder, is to approve the staff recommendations as presented today. And I will go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. Thank you all. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion. And the next on the list is still you, Tom. So I'll let you take it away with the retreat update.
Great, thank you, and thank you. We do appreciate that discussion on the right away funding. It was hard. It's hard, and I know that's you know, if we find some money, we will certainly be coming back to you to figure out and looking for opportunities and options for to fund things that we were not able to fund. So transitioning to the retreat. So this is going to be a busy Regional Housing Council week for folks. So we are coming up on our retreat, which is on Friday at the Thurston County Fairgrounds in the Expo Hall from 1 to 5. So we're super excited. We've been working with Amy Leneker. So you should have received a couple emails. If you have not RSVP'd, I think we've reached out to everybody who we had questions about. But if please let us know for those who have the invitation. You were sent some pre-work to do before the RHC, so this is a reminder to please do that pre-work. Hopefully it takes you just 5 or 10 minutes to do that, so we can dive right in. And then so happy to answer any questions around logistics. Ask that you get there a few minutes early if you can, so we can be ready to start right at 1 o'clock if possible. We will have some snacks for you there, but not a full lunch. One of the things we wanted to mention today is Amy Leneker, the facilitator, has had conversations with all the jurisdictions. Those were robust, good, strong conversations. And the recommendation coming from Amy was, she was like, you got more here than a half-day retreat. That there's a lot for us to talk and work through. So her recommendation and the focus of the retreat will be on the vision and mission of the RHC. And I think this really gets to kind of that fundamental question of what is the RHC going to work on policy issues? If so, what does that look like? And kind of what does the RHC want to do, or what are the other types of issues, topics that the RHC wants to challenge as its mission. So that is going to be the focus of the retreat. Amy has recommended that there be a second meeting, whether we call it a retreat or maybe it's just something a little bit shorter, or maybe a smaller group, that really focuses on RHC governance, and looking at who are the voting members of the RHC, the relationship of the tech team and the advisory boards and the RHC, and other kind of governance issues. So that is a recommendation that will be coming from, that has come from Amy. She even suggested possibly a third meeting that was really focused on tech team. So anyway, we talked about a half-day retreat, so wanted to really just convey those recommendations to you today. Not looking for a decision on whether we want a second meeting. I think we can do that after the retreat, see how the retreat goes, how people are feeling, and then talk about next steps at the retreat. But wanted to share that information with you so you can go into the retreat with that in the back of your mind, focus on governance, focus on mission and vision, with possibly a second meeting that's focused on governance questions. With that, happy to answer any questions that folks have about the retreat. Mostly just looking forward to spending a sunny Friday afternoon with everyone and digging in deeper into the RHC. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, you can go ahead and call on people too, Tom.
Yeah, Carolyn.
Okay. Did you mention a third? She's recommending a third meeting as well. And what was the topic of that one?
That was specific around the tech team and how the tech team works and is staffed and kind of the role of the tech team.
Okay. Thank you.
Some of that could be, depending on how the governance conversation goes, governance also kind of role. She was thinking governance could also, some of the resource allocation kind of conversation of how jurisdictions, what resources they have to allocate to the RHC. Yeah, Gary.
Hey, I just wanted to give a heads up. Our city administrator and mayor and myself did meet with the facilitator, but then discovered shortly thereafter that the city council retreat is on the same day, so only I will be at the retreat, just so everybody knows.
Oh, wow.
And second, I just want to say I did appreciate the discussion today. It was meaty. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And thank you, Tom. So this is just an information, so no decision, but is there any other information you wanted to share, Tom?
Nope, not at this time, but if anyone has questions in advance of the retreat, happy to try to answer them.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any questions for Tom? Awesome.
Thanks for picking the air-conditioned building.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that because it was hot today. So
yeah, that was luck. That was just, a month ago, I wasn't thinking about that. That's what the fairgrounds assigned us.
Yeah, stars just aligned, I think. But yeah, thanks, Tom, for the reminder to please complete the pre-work for folks who haven't had an opportunity to do that yet. It'll really help us kind of get things started smoothly. So that would be great to get your input on that before the retreat. Otherwise, if there's no questions for Tom, then we can move on to the communications update.
Can I actually, before we do that, can I just add one, if I can take the liberty to add my own 2 cents in advance of the retreat, is in talking with Amy, it was clear that there are different opinions among the jurisdictions about what the mission of the RHC should be. So I hope those kind of get elevated and talked about at the retreat, and that we don't kind of paper over those, because Amy heard some real differences in terms of what jurisdictions think the RHC should be. So I just encourage folks to come to the retreat and have those kind of open and honest discussions about what your jurisdiction really is looking to come out of the RHC. So anyway, thank you for letting me say that.
Absolutely. I was just getting ready to say last chance to comment. So you were right on time, but I appreciate that. And I guess I'll not only echo that, but also, you know, what we just heard from Gary. I really do appreciate the conversation today, and I hope that we can bring, you know, similar energy to the retreat in terms of like openly communicating with each other, even when difficult topics come up, because in working with Amy and Tom and you know, the team that kind of formed our little retreat planning subcommittee, there's been a lot of information you know, shared throughout this process of planning. And if we could be that open with each other at the retreat, I think that we could really, you know, we could really overcome a lot of the back and forth conversations that we've had in the past, and really just get moving in a direction that allows us to, you know, take action in a way that we all feel good about. And so I'm really looking forward to this retreat, and I think that it'll be really productive. So I appreciate all the work that has gone into that. Sharlaya.
Can I just, whether or not I'm on the board in the future, the TAHA board, I want to just shout out for me, Casper, speaking and kind of getting me feeling more confident speaking. I think one of the questions that sounds like might be put off is whether the boards have representatives on the RHC, and I think I credit to Carolyn as well, but I think some of the meaty conversation does come from us too. So if there's more meat wanted, we can provide it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharlaya. And I appreciate you and Casper both, because I love when we hear from you all. It really does mean a lot to me, especially knowing that we've had those conversations years ago and they're still relevant today. So being able to see familiar faces and have those kinds of discussions is very important. It's a perspective that we really don't get to hear very often working with government. So I really truly appreciate the feedback, and every time we have our advisory board members sharing and adding to the discussion, I think that it makes for a more well-rounded discussion, and that's really important. So, and also I just wanted to say, it's not going to be put off whether or not advisory board members are on the RHC, but I think the question of whether or not they're voting members is the thing that is more related to governance, and that would be a future conversation. So, but trust that that's something I've been pushing for in all of my conversations, and something that, you know, we won't let it slide without figuring it out. So even though this week is not going to be the time to make that decision, it's not going to be something that we, you know, don't make a decision on. And I really value our advisory board members' perspectives, and personally believe that they should be voting members. But that's just my opinion as an individual person, not a representative of any other group. So I'll let that rest there, and we can go ahead and move on to the communications update. So Lisa, I'll pass it over to you. I can't hear you, Lisa. It doesn't say you're muted, but I can't hear you.
Anyone else?
Oh, now we can.
Okay.
Now we can.
All right. I'm Elisa Sparkman, the communication specialist for the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention and communication specialist for the RHC. And I just wanted to remind everyone about the new regional housing newsletter. And the summer issue will be coming out at the end of June and the beginning of July. And what I would love from RHC members and staff are to keep an ear and eye out for topics to cover in the newsletter. We have a section on just quick highlights. So some things that are good to keep an eye and ear out for are any kind of housing related programs, projects, or events. And then we have an in focus section where we can go into detail on a project or program or event, or a topic of housing, and also a section called Housing Defined. And that Housing Defined is a really good section to kind of clarify things that might be common misconceptions or create kind of context, build context around something that maybe you hear a lot from community members being confused about or not really understanding the context or history about something. So those are some things to keep in mind when you're out and about in the community, and or even when you hear stuff from your fellow council members or staff. Just please send me a quick email if you have an idea or a thought, even if it's, you know, a partially made up thought. I'm happy to kind of take it on and see where we can go from there. Like today, I just heard, you know, talking about enhanced shelter, permanent supportive housing, and, you know, maybe we can do a Housing Defined that explains the different types of shelter that we have in Thurston County. So that's kind of an example just by listening to today what I came up with. So if you could all help out by letting me know if you think of anything. So that's all I have.
Well, congratulations again on the first newsletter. It was
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elisa. And when is the next one coming out?
It says quarterly, and so it is the end of June or very beginning of July to be the summer issue, and then the next one would be end of September, beginning of October for a fall edition.
Perfect. So when would you like to have any items that folks might want to recommend to include in the next newsletter?
Right now, I'd be accepting for the fall newsletter. If there is a highlight, though, for that you're thinking of right now, that would be great to include at the end of June, beginning of July. If you could just send those to me in the next week, we could include those. But as for like the main articles, those are already decided for the summer edition. But I'm happy to hear ideas for the fall and even just ideas that we could plug in anytime. So
perfect.
Yeah,
that sounds great. Thank you so much. Looking forward to that next one. So with that, it brings us to good of the order. Are there any items for good of the order? I see you thinking, Carolyn.
I'm trying to think if there is anything. Clear the cobwebs. Nothing really jumps out right now.
Okay, no worries. I'm always available if anyone wants to, you know, chat. I know there were a lot of topics today, so I'll do my best to reach out to folks if I want to touch base on certain items that were brought up today, and I'm always available as well. So if there are no items for good of the order, I'll give a couple more seconds just in case anyone has anything. Alrighty. Well, perfect. Then that brings us to the end of our agenda, and we will see each other this week for the retreat. I hope you all have a really great night. We're adjourned. Bye, everyone.